Yeah, so little warning, this is going to be a bit heterocentric. That's just the way sex is in the animal world, so apologies for my queer family out there. Um, tomorrow I'm giving a workshop on identity, power, and privilege. That's another part of my job as program director. It's been a while since I've given a talk like this. I did teach a course for a while. I'm going to talk to you about that. I did my bachelor's at Ball State University studying psychology. I was interested in human sexuality. I did my master's studying a crab spider and their mating system. And then I moved on to Cornell, where I did my PhD on ladybugs. And I looked at their sexual behavior. I saw a lot of ladybug sex, hours and hours and hours of mind-numbing ladybug sex. And they can go for typically like an hour and a half, 2 hours, so, gentlemen. Yeah, so I love studying sex so much that I designed an entire course, semester-long course, called The Biology of Sex. And this is the actual slide that I have on the screen when my students enter, all 90 of them. I taught this at Ithaca College for a couple years. And it's a wildly successful course because students are like, yeah, sex, like we're going to talk about sex, yeah. And, what they don't realize is it's actually a biology course. And their eyes glaze over when we talk about meiosis and mitosis for 2 days, Mendelian genetics, and then they feel like they got ripped off. But there is a lot of really cool stuff that we talk about. And my favorite part is mating systems, how animals behave. As a behavioral ecologist, that's what I love. I love seeing how organisms interact with each other and how they adapt to an ever-changing environment and how that influences their reproductive behavior. But we all think that we know all there is to know about sex, right? Like, oh, it makes some of us blush, it makes us laugh, it makes, us feel good about ourselves. And it was mentioned, I'm probably going to be echoing a couple things that were said earlier. And by the way, it's really difficult to follow those two talks, right? Am I right? They were really good. But our ancestors were really good at sex. That's why we like sex. Actually, Jared Diamond has a book called Why is Sex So Fun? And, why does sex feel good? It's because we're really good at it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be approaching, I think, 8.5 billion people on the planet? Yeah, we're really good at it. So, but what is sex? It's not just an activity. That's it, but... Well, first I'd like to tell you what sex is not. Sex is actually not reproduction. The two are actually quite different. You can have reproduction without sex. For example, here's a little aquatic organism called a hydra. It reproduces by a process called budding. It's a little growth that happens, and eventually it grows until it breaks off, and it's literally like a mini-me, genetically identical to the parent. Another example is the planarian. So some really sadistic researchers decided, I'm going to decapitate this organism and see what happens. And it turns out that the head will regrow a body and the body will regrow a head. They'll be genetically identical because it was once the same organism. And then some really sadistic researchers says, what happens if I cut it up into 100 pieces? How about 200 pieces? And each one of those little pieces will grow into a fully grown adult, all genetically identical. Now, this organism does do this kind of splintering on its own. You don't have to cut with a knife for this to happen. But again, reproduction, but there's no sex. This thing is really counterintuitive. All right, so asexual reproduction is producing offspring that are genetically identical to the parent. So sex then must be offspring are produced that are genetically different from the parents. How does this happen? So we have individuals, one set of individuals that produce cells called eggs, and another set of individuals that produce sperm. These are called gametes. And sperm significantly outnumber eggs. In fact, a single ejaculate from an average male contains at least, I think it's 38 million sperm, and estimates are very, very variable. There's like up to 850 million sperm. At any given time, there are roughly 8.5 million reproductively available women in the US. So a single ejaculate could fertilize every single woman in the US. Sperm are very abundant. To illustrate how abundant sperm are, or at least the plant equivalent, this is as if your car just got finished with a bukkake. So if you have allergies, actually if you don't, essentially you are inhaling plant sperm. You are welcome. So there's so much sperm in the world. So it's really, really amazing that you exist. I mean, you were a sperm once, half of you anyway, and you made it to the egg. Congratulations, you're a winner. So it should be pretty easy, right? There's so much sperm. Getting a sperm to an egg shouldn't be a problem, but it's actually a really tricky process. I mean, if it was so easy, here's another echoing to a previous talk, we wouldn't need OkCupid and Tinder. It's actually quite difficult to find a match. I mean, maybe for some of you it's not difficult. Maybe some of you are really slick and, you know. Oh, it's Amanda. Oh, Google. All right, so getting your sperm to an egg requires some finesse in some cases. So we're all pretty familiar with the peacock and his beautiful feathers and how he displays them for the females. Lots and lots of wonderful bird examples of mating systems.
But no one is watching.
All right, here we go. This is one of my favorites. All right, so these males are trying to communicate, hey, notice me, I'm so hot and sexy, I have good genes, you should mate with me. We see differences in fish. So the betta fish that you see at the pet store, you only see the males because the ladies are ugly. You might be familiar with lightning beetles. We often say lightning bugs, but they're actually beetles. The males are out dancing around and glowing, and actually, I don't know if you know this, but each species has a unique signature, and the females recognize them. There's actually a really interesting case of a female that mimics the flash of the male that is advertising. He comes in to, because she's signaling, hey, come here, I'm ready, I'm interested. He gets there to discover that it's not a member of his species, it's actually another species, and she eats him. Sneaky little lady. But surely this doesn't apply to humans. Of course it does. Some men go to great lengths. There's actually, a whole field of evolutionary psychology that addresses the behavior of men and women and kind of the evolutionary relationships between other organisms and how we behave. There's some wonderful films out there that address it. This is not a unique phenomenon, this whole gift giving in the animal world, which we are a part. We call this nuptial gifts. This is one of my favorite little memes of a jumping spider. So that's an example of an edible gift. This is a little dancing fly, and it creates this little ball of silk which has absolutely no edible value. But it communicates to the female, hey, look, I can make this really cool thing. And there's variation between males in the quality of their silk balls. Here's a really impressive one. This is the bush cricket female, and she is sporting a lovely spermatophore, which is a thing that came up earlier. The male deposits this on the female, and she is consuming the edible portion. Actually, the whole thing is edible, but this is where the sperm is located. And the spermatophore is approximately a quarter of the body weight of the male. So, gentlemen, that would be approximately a 50-pound ejaculate if you weigh 200 pounds. So why? The female gets this nutritious meal. The male buys some time for sperm transfer by allowing the female to eat this product. The eggs get a wonderful, nutritious donation by the male. One of my favorite birds, though, is the bowerbird. The bowerbird males build these bowers. Some are vertical like this. Others are these little kind of house-like structures. And the males, they have personalities. They like different things. This male liked blue things a lot, and he collected blue straws and blue bottle caps. This male preferred, looks like some garbage, some orange peels, some berries, maybe some nuts, I don't know. Some of them are quite elaborate. I don't know how this is going to go over with the ladies. But once a female comes to his bower, he then displays one of his most prized possessions. So I'm not sure if this is a flower, but oftentimes it is. I mean, it could be a bottle cap. It's his favorite bottle cap. I don't know. And he'll then toss it around and display it for the female. And then the female, in this case here, she'll enter the bower and she'll observe. And if she's interested, they'll copulate. But there's so much variation in the way males decorate their bowers. It's really lovely. All right, so males go to great lengths to find females to mate with them. Whereas, you saw with the asexual reproduction, you just, bud off and you've got babies all over the place. Why go to all the trouble when asexual reproduction is so much more efficient? Well, sex creates diversity. This image shows a single species of lady beetle. Does anybody recognize it? Does anybody get them in their house? Yeah. So this is the multicolored Asian lady beetle. You might call them ladybugs. They are from Asia, as you might have guessed. And a lot of times people don't think that they're lady beetles. They think, oh, it's the beetle that looks like a lady beetle, but it's not. But it's actually a lady beetle. It's a coccinellid. And we call this a highly polymorphic species. Poly meaning many, morphic meaning forms. And genetic diversity is at the heart of natural selection. Without genetic diversity, natural selection doesn't operate in the way that we see it. So, for example, if you have a population of individuals that are genetically identical and a pathogen comes into the population and all of the individuals are susceptible to it, they're all wiped out. But if you have genetic variation, some of those individuals might actually be resistant, and those individuals will survive and they will reproduce, and the resistant genes will populate throughout the population. So sex is a very powerful tool and has resulted in a wide variety of mating systems. And there are two primary underlying forces operating throughout this and generating the variety of mating systems that we see. I had the praying mantis in here as an example of sexual conflict, which is one of the two forces. But I suspected Tay was going to cover it, and he did. Thank you. But the Argonaut is an octopus, and the male too is at risk of sexual cannibalism. just like the mantis. But rather than get eaten or risk getting eaten, the male has evolved to have a detachable penis. This is the penis. This is the male. This is the female. It's the only octopus that actually secretes a shell, by the way. So the male is at risk of being eaten while he's trying to transfer sperm. So rather than risk that, he detaches his penis, but then he dies. I mean, he doesn't mate again, which is all right, because the risk is that he could try to mate, and then before he actually transfers the sperm, he gets eaten, and then sperm doesn't get transferred. So it's better for him to lose the penis and die than to risk being eaten before sperm can be transferred. Here's another interesting penis. Wait for it. There it is. All right. So, why would a duck need a penis that's longer than its body length? I mean, being well hung is one thing, right? But being too hung, that's a thing. Anyway, a little biology about the male duck penis is that it's not a hollow tube. It's actually a corkscrew, and as you saw, it was unfolding, and there are ridges along it that the sperm travel down to get to the female. But the reason why the male has such an elaborate piece of equipment is because the female, too, has an elaborate piece of equipment. Now, if size were the issue here, females would win, right? Come on now. She's like at least twice as long. So here's where that sexual conflict comes into play. This is the mallard duck. Males like to rape. And the females have evolved this kind of counter adaptation to deal with rape. Inside the, which one is it? There we go. Inside the female genital tract, you've got all of these labyrinth-like dead ends and crevices. So if the female is not into the dude, she'll just be like, you're going that way, and she can pretty much limit access to her genital tract. However, if she's into the guy, she can then facilitate movement into the right location. So this is an example of this evolutionary arms race. Basically, the male gets an edge on the female, and then the female gets an edge on the male. We see this in parasites and their hosts. We see this in predators and prey. So sexual conflict is a major force in the development of mating systems. So how many cat lovers? Okay, some of you probably already know about this, and for the others of you, I'm sorry, you might have nightmares. You'll never look at your cat the same way. This is your cat's penis. So these are actually pretty rigid little spines, and this is the male's head is up this way. So when he inserts into the female, it scrapes her on the way out. So the thinking here is, the hypotheses are, one, it stimulates ovulation. So that benefits the male because he can then fertilize her eggs with his sperm. Another hypothesis is that it damages the vagina, and she is then less likely to remate right away. So again, he's maximizing his ability to fertilize her eggs, when in fact she would benefit from mating with multiple males. So again, sexual conflict. Incidentally, pearly penile papules. Peter Piper picked a This happens in roughly 25% of men, or boys rather. There have been estimates up to 43%. We know that our ancestors had penile spines and that we lost them. So if you might imagine, the competition between males for mates can lead to some pretty interesting genitalia, some of which are very weapon-like. And that only exists if there's a risk that a female is going to mate multiple times. So The spines, we think, were lost because humans became more monogamous. So we gradually lost our spines. So we don't really understand these little spine-like bumps on the penis, but we know that they're not sexually transmitted, they're not warts, there's nothing bad about them. So gentlemen, if you have these, it's okay. You can just thank your ancestors and feel privileged. All right, so that's sexual conflict is one major force. The other one is sperm competition. And I've already hinted at that. Males are competing for access to fertilizations. So far, I've talked about internal fertilization. This is an example of external fertilization. So the males fertilize the eggs after they've been laid. So how many people have seen frogs that are piggyback riding? Yeah, okay. So this is a position called ambiplexus. The males grasp onto the females really tightly. They're guarding her. They're waiting for her to lay eggs so that they can then fertilize those eggs. And the males will continue to guard her so that other males cannot gain access to her eggs. I'm surprised this didn't come up. Honeybees. Honeybees have a really interesting mating system. They do the nuptial flight just like the termites and ants. Drones are the males, and they're lucky if they get to mate once. There are so many more males than females. So they have little to lose if they die after their first mating. And in fact, that's what they do. Their penis explodes, and they fall to the ground and die. A happy, happy bee. So this is an example of a genital plug. So other organisms use other types of plugs. There's a ghost crab that actually uses a cement-like substance to glue the sperm from another male into the spermathecum of the female, and then he deposits his sperm and his gets used first. So there are all sorts of tactics that males use to prevent females from remaining. This is the sperm competition. In this case, as you might imagine, with natural selection being the way it is, males have figured out ways to dislodge the previous male's penis. So the female does end up mating multiple times, but there's an obvious evolutionary advantage. Otherwise, this behavior would no longer exist. So it might buy that male a little more time for sperm transfer, but yeah, one of the more scary, I think, mating systems. All right, so, I call this the penis chastity belt. So this is the damselfly apparatus. And you can see how it's kind of like a spatula that is used to scoop out sperm from previous males. And I knew that this photo existed because I used it in my lecture for my class, but I didn't have my file. So I actually, I went online and searched for it, and I discovered something interesting. You can not only buy a beautiful print of this, you can buy a jigsaw puzzle, greeting cards, flip-flops, a tote bag, earrings, why not? A phone case, lunch bag, and why not? Golf balls. Who? All right, so this came up a moment ago. Thank you, Tate, for not elaborating. The anglerfish, very lovely organisms, featured in Finding Nemo. These occur about a mile below sea level where it's very dark. They use a bioluminescent lure on their head here. Some look like little dainty pieces of lace, others just look like balls, and they wave them around trying to lure prey. Their mating system is a bit more interesting.
Here we will learn true facts about the anglerfish. The female anglerfish comes in many shapes, colors, and shades of ugly. It's like a rainbow of ugly. The male anglerfish is tiny by comparison, like a tiny little baby. He attaches himself to the female by biting her and then digesting part of his face so he fuses with her flesh. He then atrophies, losing his digestive organs, brain, heart, and eyes, and winds up nothing more than a pair of gonads, which release sperm when needed. Hey there, pretty lady. Nice gonads. To the female anglerfish, the human male is a very loud, annoying, and unnecessarily complicated pair of gonads.
All right, so if we go back to this slide, you can see that this female, wrong, this female has two males that she has secured. Now, impossible. Yeah, so it's very difficult first to find prey at sea, that in water. Yeah, I can speak. In water that deep, it's very difficult to find mates. So the males benefit from devoting their entire life to this one female because the probability of finding more than one female is slim to none. All right. So if you like these interesting topics as much as I do, I recommend a few resources. One is Green Porno. Anybody heard of Green Porno? Yeah. Sundance produced these. They're three seasons. I think there's only 18 episodes, but I show them in my class all the time. Isabella Rossellini, an actress, filmmaker, she puts on these elaborate, realistic costumes and recreates mating systems. They're very short. They're so much fun to watch. Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice to All Creation is a required textbook for my course. It is a popular science book in which the author is a sex advice columnist. And all of these organisms write in these funny little, like, my lover's been on my back for 3 days. He's being very possessive, and it's a stick insect. And she responds with, accurate information about the biology and ecology of that organism and mentions a whole bunch of others. So it's a really fun read, and it teaches you a lot about mating systems. Nature's Nether Regions is another good popular science book, and although I only just ordered my copy of The Dawn of the Deed, my friend over here keeps harassing me about it, so I will report back on that at some other time. So, thanks for listening.